anticipate that based on these figures today and other data that has come in, that we will achieve better than the budgeted outcome for the final year for 16-17 on the underlying cash balance.
But there are good reasons to be cautious about the future as some of the growth engines begin to weaken.
We know from the leading indicators that the residential construction cycle will likely peak later this year. So what has been a very key contributor to growth for the last few years will become less so as this year unfolds. And in 2018, we actually think the residential construction cycle will probably drag on activities.
The other major concern is households' deteriorating savings performance. Australians are saving just over 4.5% of their income, the lowest proportion since the GFC. Not a cause for concern, according to the Treasurer. In fact, the opposite.
Although I agree with what the Economist woman was saying, somehow, conveniently, it's always the end of this year that they expect the construction approvals and construction to peak. So that was one point that I got from that. And the second point, that the Treasurer Scott Morrison was saying that quite the opposite. There's no problems with the economy. It's not going to peak. It's all going to go fine. And he says quite the opposite of what the numbers are showing. And I'm saying that you should think the opposite of what he says, which basically goes back to numbers. So whatever the politician says for you and recommends for you to do, I think you do the opposite. But watch this next story.
We think there are a number of headwinds still for the consumer. High levels of debt, rising utility prices, and still what is pretty weak wages growth all round.
The GFC taught us a number of very important lessons, and one of them was that it's really important for the household sector to have resilience. They need to hold large savings balances so that when there's a shock to their income, they have the capacity to withstand that shock and are not forced to sell their properties, not forced to go out the street because they can't pay their electricity bills.
The GDP's measure of wages fell 0.3%, a blow that was softened by an increase in the number of jobs. But it underlines the difficulties the government faces in meeting its budget forecasts of 2.5% wages growth this financial year and 3% next year.
I expect it to track what our forecasts currently say in the budget.
Unfortunately, it's a problem that may be out of the Treasurer's hands.
Hey, let me tell you something about liar loans. Now, remember going back to the US and the big subprime mortgage collapse that happened in, 2007, 8, 9, where the property prices slumped in America because people who weren't really supposed to get loans and mortgages were given mortgages by going to these subprime lenders, so not the T1 lenders, but somebody who's going to give you a loan if you can fog up a mirror. Well, it's coming to Australia, but hey, wait, it can never happen here because it hasn't happened before. About 24 million people, minus some of the realists like myself, think that Sydney and Melbourne and Australian housing is just going to continue to go up. Hey, but back to my story about the Australian version of Ninja Loans. Remember, no income, no job, and no assets is Ninja Loans, and people still got mortgages in America. Here, they call them liar loans. Have a look at this next story.
Question that getting finance for a home loan in Sydney and Melbourne has become increasingly tough. A new report from global financial services company UBS suggests some buyers are willing to stretch the truth in their bid for a mortgage. The bank surveyed more than 900 people who took out a home loan in 2017. Two-thirds of them said their mortgage application was completely factual and accurate. That means about a third of loan paperwork included false or misleading information, colloquially called liar loans. Given the average turnover of home loans in Australia, UBS estimates about $500 billion worth of home loans contain misinformation about income, assets, existing debts or expenses. The most common lie was understating living costs.
I mean, what could go wrong? $500 billion of this. I think they said billion, not million. I know it's a big difference. to the power of 1,000 or 3. But whatever the case is, I mean, what could go wrong? But I do want to give you just one more story. I'm pretty sure you're going to enjoy it and be able to educate yourself as to what to do with your money. Don't invest in cryptos. Let me give you the story now. Okay, let's see what's going on in the PRC, more famously known as People's Republic of China. All eyes are on China. They have been there. All the eyeballs were attracted to China for the last many years, probably 5 years very intensely, 10 years all up during this unprecedented growth rate of Chinese and their overseas investment. Now, I ended up my last segment saying what could go wrong. Well, maybe plenty, but hey, nothing's yet going wrong, so it's probably all going to continue to be okay. But let's watch this next one.
Voracious Chinese demand for off-the-plan property has helped fuel the overheated East Coast housing market. As a group, Chinese buyers are the biggest foreign investors in Australian residential real estate, spending 4 times more than US investors who are in second place. But the Reserve Bank is warning that lending restrictions and higher taxes will see this lucrative market start to shrink. As offshore buyers pull out of sales, there are predictions it will hit Sydney and Melbourne property prices.
Oh no, well, we've heard that before, so I'm starting not to believe that. I think there's going to be some other nation that's going to just pop up with all this money and they're going to spread like cancer. But maybe not, but let's see what happens.
Here's Emily Stewart.
Yeah, now you're still watching ABC. You know, I haven't switched to any other topic like techno music or disco music, so bear with me. This is about Chinese shoving their money anywhere they can, pulling it out of China.
For years, buy seemed the mantra of offshore Chinese investors. With deep pockets, they've dominated the off-the-plan property market. But with the tightening of government regulations, the welcome mat's being rolled back up.
We found out in the last 12 months, our offshore market is cooled down a big time.
Chinese investors have helped drive the property market to new heights. They're the biggest group of foreign buyers of Australian real estate, according to the Foreign Investment Review Board, spending $32 billion in 2015-16 alone, mostly in Sydney and Melbourne. That's 4 times the United States. As non-residents, they're restricted to purchasing newly constructed property, and while they only account for a fraction of the $7 trillion market, the slowdown has been enough for Sydney-based Linfield property agents to change their strategy and sell to local Chinese buyers instead.
In 2015, roughly I will be saying off the plan wise, I'll have 50% overseas clients, 50% local clients. But up to this year, 2017, my overseas client will be also about 10% only, not so many at all.
Last year, the Reserve Bank warned a reduction in Chinese off-the-plan investment is inevitable. And if Chinese investors pull back, it could weigh on domestic property prices.
It's a maelstrom of issues that's converged together at the same time. So you've got the capital constraints, which has been tightening up over the last 6 months. And increasingly on the horizon, it looks to continue to be tight.
Access to cash is the biggest challenge. The Chinese government has further restricted how individuals transfer money abroad. And just this month, it's put the brakes on companies spending on overseas property development too. An Australian bank stopped lending to overseas buyers last year.
It's getting harder and harder to get the money out from China.
Harder and harder to get money out of China. I mean, why are they getting all this money out of China? I mean, what, are they afraid of the government? Well, just see what our government has in store for them. Continue watching this.
At the same time, Chinese investors now have to pay more tax for Australian property. The Victorian and New South Wales state governments have increased stamp duty charges for foreign investors, which amounts to an average of $30,000. And the federal government is set to introduce a $5,000 vacant property tax as part of a package of housing affordability measures.
I think it would have an impact if you see the situation in Vancouver, Toronto, Hong Kong and Singapore. All these countries at one point in time increased foreign stamp duty quite significantly to levels similar to Australia or slightly higher. And in all cases, there was a dip in the demand and the pricing and the volume of business.
While no formal statistics are captured, real estate agents contacted by the ABC are already seeing an increase in nomination sales, where buyers try and on-sell their off-the-plan properties when it comes time to settle. It's happening in Sydney.
I can't deny. For our business, we are okay. But as I heard from my agent friends, yes, quite a lot of overseas buyers, they are struggling to get the finance here. So either they will choose just to pay off straight away, or they would rather just say, okay, I'll lose the 10% deposit and then I'll walk away.
Or maybe they can just go away, take their money somewhere else.
And in Melbourne,
tightening of the finance regulations has made it harder, and so there are more buyers exploring the nomination sale at the moment than they would have been in the past.
rules for developers have changed too. They can only sell up to half the apartments in a new development to foreign investors.
Now we can see a lot of overseas buyers from the mainland China. They shifted their focus away from Australia. Now, my understanding is they are looking at our neighbor New Zealand, Europe, and some other Asian country to invest.
Oh, it's New Zealand, Europe. I mean, good luck to you.
So the property is sold.
While disappointing for those in the real estate industry, it could take some of the heat out of the Australian market.
I love it how everybody uses their words carefully. What is on everybody's lips is that it's going to be a housing market collapse. But you know what? That has been on a lot of people's lips for years, including my own, and I've been wrong. So we're just going to have to wait and see what happens.